Okay, here's problem number 2 from the North Carolina Math 1 EOC from 2016. And I can see that it is made up of 3 parts. There's the text part, and then there's a graph, and then there are my 4 answer choices. So I'm going to be going back and forth between these 3 parts of the problem as we try to make sense of it. So I start out by reading the problem. It says, what scenario could be modeled by the graph below? All right, so I just have a question here. Here's the graph, and I can see right away that the graph, since it's got the shaded part in here and it's got a straight line right here, this tells me that it's a graph of a linear inequality. That's what the shaded part here tells me. It's going to be an inequality and not just a linear equation. And let's take a look at my answer choices here. So I noticed that all my answer choices, they look kind of similar. So the first one says the number of pounds of apples, y, minus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. And then each one of them kind of reads the same way. The number of pounds of apples, y, minus half the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. Number of pounds of apples, y, plus 2 times the number of pounds is at most 5. And so they all have the same kind of wording. The numbers are a little bit different in each one, but the wording is similar. And I also noticed that each one of them, it reads like an equation. So I'm hoping that maybe I can translate each of these answer choices into an algebraic equation and then maybe match that up. One of those hopefully is going to match up with the graph that I have, and I'll see if I can figure out which one of these matches with the graph. Okay, so let's see if I can translate each of these answer choices into an algebraic equation. So the number of pounds of apples, y, minus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. Okay, so a lot of times translating from English into algebraic notation is kind of complicated, but this, it seems like they're making it kind of easy on me because these read almost exactly like an equation. Plus, I can see there's some stuff that I can eliminate. All of these start out with the number of pounds of apples, y. Number of pounds of apples, y. Number of pounds of apples, y. So it's telling me use y to stand for the number of pounds of apples. Okay, so instead of, I'm just going to kind of ignore number of pounds of apples, I'm just going to call that y. So y minus 2 times, all right, this is pretty easy, 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x. All right, again, it's telling me that the number of pounds of oranges is x, and in fact, I can see that's the same for each one of my answer choices. Number of pounds of oranges, x. Number of pounds of oranges, x. They're all the same. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to cross out this whole number of pounds of oranges, and I'm just going to use x for my number of pounds of oranges. So now I have y minus 2 times x is, that's my equal sign. When I see that in English in a math text or math problem, the is usually used for an equal sign. So y minus 2 times x is at most 5. Okay, now I'm running into the whole inequality part because this at most 5, that's telling me that's my inequality part. So there's going to be either a greater than symbol or a less than symbol in my, I don't actually have an equation, it's going to be an inequality. I'm going to go ahead and leave that out for now. I'm going to treat this as an equation and not as an inequality because sometimes the greater than sign and the less than sign, they get me a little confused. So I'm going to leave that out for now, and I'm going to come back to it later if I need to. So I'm just going to write this as an equation and not as an inequality. So I'm just going to be writing down this part of my graph. I'm going to be writing it as though it were just the graph of a straight line. All right, so y minus 2 times x is 5. All right, and again, I know that's not strictly what this sentence says because there's the whole greater than or less than, but I'm just going to pretend for now, and I'll come back to that later. All right, so there's answer choice A, or at least a simplified form of answer choice A. Answer choice B, y minus half x, so y minus 1/2 x is, and again I'm going to ignore that for now, is 5. Okay? Answer choice C. Y plus 2 times x is 5. All right. Answer choice D. Y plus half, oranges, half x is 5. Okay, so now I've rewritten each one of these answer choices. I've translated them from English into algebraic notation. I know they're not strictly correct because I'm treating them all as equations and not as inequalities, but that's okay for now. If I need to put in the inequality part, I can go back and do that later. So now I'm wondering, does any of these 4 answer choices, does any of these equations match the equation of this graph right here, the graph of this straight line? Well, I need to know what's the equation, what's the algebraic notation for this graph right here, the graph of this straight line. Well, can I come up with that? I know I have y equals mx plus b. That's the slope-intercept form of a linear equation where this is my slope and this is my y-intercept. So if I knew my slope and my y-intercept for this graph here, for this straight line, I could just plug those numbers in. Well, let's see. My y-intercept, I can see my y-intercept is right here. I can just read that off of the graph. My y-intercept is 5, so there's plus 5. And let's see, can I figure out the slope of this line? I think I can, because I've got some points on my graph here that appear to be easier to read because they lie right on one of the little crosshatch marks here. So I've got a point here, I've got a point here, and I've got a point here. And I can also see that the slope of my line here is negative because I know that lines that go in this direction, these are lines that have a positive slope, and lines that go in this direction are lines that have a negative slope. So this line has a negative slope, all right, so I know that is going to be negative. So let's see, it's going to be negative, and I go over 1 and down 2, over 1 and down 2, or actually I could think of it as, if I start here, I go up 2 and over 1, or up 2 and over 1. So that's 2 over 1. My slope is negative 2 over 1. And again, I know that it's negative 2 over 1 and not negative 1 over 2 because I can see that my slope is steeper than a slope of just regular negative 1, which would be like a 45-degree angle. Since it's steeper than that, I know it must be a higher number value than 1, which means that it must be a slope of 2. And again, since it goes in this direction, it's negative 2. All right, so now I have y equals negative 2x plus 5. Again, I'm just using the equal sign. I'm kind of ignoring the fact that this is an inequality. And, oh shoot, all of my answer choices, they're not in this form. So I would like to get these in the same form. So all of my answer choices, they have 5 by itself on the right side of the equal sign, and the y term and the x term on the left side. So how about if I take my equation that I've got here, and let's move my x term, negative 2x, over to the other side. So how about if I add 2x to both sides of my equation? So that's going to get rid of my x terms over here. And on the right side of my equation, I'm going to have y plus 2x. And on the right side, I'm going to have just 5. So here I have y plus 2x equals 5. And does one of these match? Yes, it does. Answer choice C, y plus 2x equals 5. So answer choice C is my answer. Now let's go into part 2 of our video, and let's take a look at the different strategies that I used to make sense of this problem and come up with the correct solution.